Our conversation is going to be with Jonathan Parfrey, who is the Executive Director of Climate Resolve based in Los Angeles. And I'm going to go straight to our review with you, Jonathan. I'm looking at your list of accomplishments and places you worked, and it's really long. And our listeners should know that you've done everything from work for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, lecturing at UCLA, president of Los Angeles League of Conservation Voters. You've regional collaborators for climate adaptation, Green LA Coalition, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and you've even served on Governor Schwarzenegger's environmental policy team. You must have started when you were about 4.
I don't know if I'm accomplished. I'm just old. I think so I've done a lot of things.
Well, we just appreciate Climate Resolve's partnership with ecoAmerica and Path to Positive, and you've been doing terrific work. And first, I just want to check in. I hope that you and your family and your staff are okay. I know that there are wildfires even as we speak. How's everybody doing?
Thank you for asking. Candidly, we are living under amber colored skies. Everything has the tint and smell of wildfire smoke. And believe it or not, Los Angeles is just, our air is just horrible, but we're not as horrible currently as the Bay Area. Our friends in San Francisco, Oakland, Marin, they're really in the crosshairs right now. And even up into the Sacramento Valley, the fires there have really concentrated a lot of particulate matter in the air, and it's very hard for them to breathe, as it's true also for Oregon and Washington. They're going through a very hard time right now. And just south of us, the air quality is fantastic. So go figure.
Well, you know, even in the midst of all this, I know that Climate Resolve continues to work on solutions, and you've had some tremendous success. And I know that a lot of that is because of great engagement with Angelenos. And it's easier now to make the connection with climate and extreme weather, but it hasn't always been that way. And I'd love just start talking, tell your story about engaging Angelenos and helping people understand what we can do to help with climate resilience and mitigation.
Well, Jennifer, when we started 10 years ago, the Waxman-Markey legislation in Congress was just failing. And people were casting about, well, we tried to do a top-down approach. That didn't work. What's next? And our organization decided to step in and champion a local approach. We recognize that climate change is global in nature. Of course it is. Does it really matter if the carbon dioxide comes out of a tailpipe in Mumbai or in Alhambra, Los Angeles? It kind of doesn't matter. It goes into our common atmosphere. What does, however, matter locally is how climate change is experienced. And about 10 years ago, if you recall, people were talking about climate change affecting polar bears or people living in South Sea Islands. And candidly, even though I could totally be sympathetic, empathetic with people going through these situations, the vast majority of Americans were just too busy with their daily lives to think abstractly about other places. And so our organization decided to bring home the effects of climate change and talk about that in a way that people could really relate to it, understand it, and see the connections between the hotter days that they're experiencing, the wildfire smoke that they're bringing in, and its connection to climate change. So if you forgive a little Yiddish profanity, we have the tuchus theory of climate change. You got to put people's tuchus in the picture, and that's what we've been trying to do. And we've had some success. Another really important factor, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is that you need to tell stories of success. It could be so depressing to see the entire West Coast on fire and millions of acres now are burning. And you could think, you know, how are we going to get out in front of this thing? And the only way to counteract that is with stories of success, of people making a difference. And so here in Los Angeles, we chose to champion a few things where people could feel as if they were in the climate fight and it made a difference. They actually won. And we did this by championing a thing called cool roofs in Los Angeles. So that means that the sunlight hits a house in Los Angeles, and that sunlight, that shortwave radiation, bounces off of the roof, goes back into space, and doesn't become part of the climate problem. And also, by reflecting that sunlight, it keeps that domicile cool. And we've been very successful.
Every roof in Los Angeles has to have that now, right?
We did a policy change. We worked closely with the city and the then mayor, Antonio Villaraigosa, to affect that change. And so now it's part of the building code. And we've now, I think last count, there might be 35 to 40,000 new cool roofs in the city of Los Angeles. And eventually it's going to get to 100% of the city's rooftops will have to be of a cool roof that's reflecting sunlight back into space. And that'll help cool down the region. But that's something that people could feel and experience firsthand. We've also been working with the city's Bureau of Street Services to experiment with cool pavements. And so right now, there's something like 70 square blocks in Los Angeles where there's different products. And I use the word experiment very carefully, because do we have the perfect product yet? No. Do we have the right price point to do this broadly across the city? No. But are we searching for the right materials to make that change? Yes. And so we're very excited about this. And candidly, we're also very big proponents of urban forestry and vegetation, not artificial turf, but real grass, as a means of cooling down the city. And we follow the science, and it hasn't led us wrong thus far.
I have to ask, when you helped get the ordinance passed to require all new roofs to have a cool roof, what did the house builders and development communities say? Was there like a whole discussion and kind of bringing them along that happened?
There's a large company that is located in Minnesota. They make N95 face masks, and they make Post-it notes. I don't need to say their name. Actually, we like this company very much, and they were an ally of ours in moving the granules that get embedded on asphalt shingles to have this more reflective coating. And candidly, they were very cooperative in promulgating this new standard. And then we also met with the roofers, and there was a general understanding that we were giving them a long lead time so that they could move their existing product out. And because we're playing a long game here, Jennifer, this isn't, I have so many friends who are into the, let's get everything done now. But with climate change, we are allowed to play something of a long game on some matters. And when it comes to roofing materials, I think over the course of 20 years, if we can convert the roofing stock to be a better kind of more climate-friendly roof, I think 20 years is a fair way of approaching it. And so that's what we're planning on doing.
It's interesting. Our research actually shows that if you talk about setting a goal to 100% clean energy, that like 3/4 of Americans are totally into that. But if you say by 2030, you start to lose more conservative folks because, like you said, that time crunch, that pressure, people are nervous about what's the cost going to be and how much is that going to, take priority over other things that we need for our economy. So that's a really good way to look at it. And clearly you've been successful. I'm curious. I remember you talking about going into neighborhoods and talking neighborhood to neighborhood about that urban heat issue and really bringing it home. Did you find that as in other parts of the country that there's a whole issue of environmental justice, that some of the low-income communities had even more of a heat problem than some of the others, and were they equally receptive to that change?
So I could provide the Los Angeles example. I am hesitant to talk about other cities, but
Nope, just you. Yeah.
in LA, there is a direct relationship between income levels, the value of property, and the tree canopy of those areas. And it's directly correlated in the way that you would imagine. So the lower income areas, fewer trees. The wealthier communities like Beverly Hills, from the air, you almost can't see any homes in Beverly Hills because there are so many trees. So what we're trying to do is build out the tree canopies in areas that are low income areas. And what we've also done are some experiments of going into low income communities and talking about multi-beneficial changes to the street. So to have a cool street is very important, to enable more pedestrian access and use, and bicycle use of active transportation. That's also on the table of a complete street. And then here in Los Angeles, it rains only a few months out of the year. So we need to capture the rainwater as best as possible and then store it for use. And so we call those green streets, where you can capture water and infiltrate it into the groundwater. Anyway, so these are things that we're attempting to do in low-income communities. We've met with people in those communities, and when we have these conversations in both English and Spanish, people are very receptive. They want to be seen as being part of a solution, and they're actually, when we lay down the reflective pavements in Los Angeles, you would think people thought, oh, there's going to be glare or there's going to be these other problems. And people go with some pride, oh, this is great that this experiment is being done on my street. I love that. So we have not run into any NIMBY opposition at all.
Wow, that is such a great story. And it's so important to talk about doing it in Spanish and English, because that's what your community needs. And there's so many communities in the US that have other language groups who really need to be reached out to. And so that's just such a great model of engagement. And again, our research shows that when people feel like they can do something, it helps relieve that eco-anxiety.
And what we did on our outreach, we work with people from the neighborhood. It's not like, the Spanish-speaking gabachos from downtown LA come in and tell them, what's going on climate change. We hire people from the community to talk at a peer-to-peer level with the people in the community. And we also have a theory that it's very important to provide funding, stipends to community-based organizations to participate in these things. So that's woven into our approach, is treating people respectfully. And when you do that, you get a much better result.
Yeah, and it's really important when we talk about engaging the community that people really do need to do an inventory of the groups that are out there, and language groups, different socioeconomic groups, different racial groups, to make sure everybody's included and
Yes.
everybody's part of that solution. So great for you doing that. I want to talk about one other area that Los Angeles is known for, transportation. And you've also had some success there and some alternative forms. And then I think you were helping stop a highway. So tell us a little bit about that engagement and some of those successes so we can get some more of the inspirational examples.
So our organization, I think, has a reputation of being able to work with government. We are not, bomb throwers. But sometimes there are things that are so stupid, we have to say, okay, stop. We provide testimony, we meet with the developers, we meet with the proponents, we try to have that conversation. But when it's just like going up against the climate goals set forward by the state of California, where the governor's office at the time whispers to us, oh yeah, go after that project, our hands are tied, please do something about it. When it's just so stupid that we have to do something, we do things. And so we have been engaged in 2 lawsuits. One was to stop a new freeway that would have spurred development that is 50 miles away from any job center that there is. So the greenhouse gas emissions of people getting in cars, driving to work and back would have been absolutely, would have blown apart any of the climate goals that we were setting forward. So we stopped something called the High Desert Corridor. And if you know Southern California, it would have been a freeway that connected Palmdale with Apple Valley. It's going across Los Angeles and San Bernardino County. And there would have literally been hundreds of thousands of new residents up in that high desert region. Also, the high desert, it's not very conducive to housing because of the water situation up there as well. So we were able to negotiate with the California Department of Transportation, otherwise known as Caltrans, to hold off on that project. And indeed, in the latest regional planning exercise for transportation, the High Desert Corridor no longer appears on those documents. So we feel that this is a landmark decision for the good in Southern California, and to refocus on building up our more densely populated areas and do it in a smart way, so we have our populations more closely together, taking public transit and reducing greenhouse gas emissions that way. And so we do focus in on transportation. In the state of California, the California Air Resources Board runs their own inventory of how much greenhouse gas emissions are being emitted and from what sector. Transportation currently is 42%, and that's tailpipe emissions. If you take into account oil extraction, processing, and refining, add in another 10 to 12%. So in reality, over 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the state of California are attributable to transportation, and that is mainly automobiles, and that is mainly people getting to and from work in their cars on freeways in California. And so we have been very active in promoting public transportation. One of these days, we're going to be done with this COVID thing, and people will feel very comfortable getting back on trains. And in Los Angeles, we passed 2 amazing measures where we decided to tax ourselves in order to build up public transportation. Measures R and Measures M, which is going to spur tens of billions of dollars for the LA County area to build out our public transportation. And we're very excited about this, these 2 initiatives, and our organization helped establish a sustainability council at the Transportation Authority locally called Metro. So that's just an example of how we've been engaging on transportation, but there's still a lot of work to do. You know, people, they're just born into the notion that the way to get around is with a car. That's just baked into their understanding and almost their identity. It's like, my identity is I want a nice car and I want to go places in a nice car. It's baked in. And what we're trying to do is help people see that the quality of life that you can achieve by having a more communal experience via public transportation, or by bicycling where you get more aerobic exercise, or walking, all of those things, I think, yield a better quality of life, either more understanding of knowing your community or better physical health. And it's going to take a long time to get Los Angeles there, but we're committed to that vision.
That's just great, great information that almost every city in America can implement in terms of making it easier to bike and walk. And one of the positive things we've seen during COVID is that local is in again, that people want to be closer to things. They want to be able to walk and bike. Many cities are shutting down whole areas of streets for bicycles and pedestrians because it gives them more room. People can walk without having to feel like they're, too close to someone who might have COVID, and that's carrying into our habits. And so we absolutely want to keep those good habits and show how much better our quality of life is when we do have those strong local communities with mixed use. That's another thing that's happened a lot in cities is having the pharmacy and the grocery store within walking distance, and having that mix in neighborhoods so that you're not, separated, as you say, by miles and having to drive everywhere. So it's great to know in that story about stopping a superhighway or freeway that big institutional bureaucratic things can be changed through citizen engagement and involvement. And that's something Climate Resolve has been great at doing. And voters had to approve bonds for the transit too. How
Yes, so that was exactly what happened. We needed to get 66.6% of the people of Los Angeles County. In California, we could only approve revenue measures by 2/3 vote, but we got there.
Wow, so it requires a 2/3 vote. That's terrific.
Yeah. We achieved 70% actually on the transportation measures. We're very pleased with our ability to organize and do the turnout. We were one of many coalition members. I don't want to suggest that it was just Climate Resolve, that achieved this landmark new policy, but we did play a role, and we were very happy to play a role.
Well, Jonathan, these are great examples. And again, we just appreciate all the work that you've been doing in Los Angeles and the lessons it has for other folks across the country. As you say, this is a time we need to focus on positive and what people personally can be part of and the changes they can see right here and right now, because climate change is right here and right now, and especially for our neighbors in the western part of our country. So we're just, we're all just thinking about you and hoping that rain comes, that people start helping mitigate the changes that are causing our climate to change so rapidly.
Yeah, we almost don't need to make the argument anymore, Jennifer, that climate change is impacting us. I think people are getting the message through their lungs right now. So they get it.
Yeah. So before we end our conversation, can you think about just, we're in election season and there's it's such a hyper divided country right now, but you've done such great work in so many areas. What gives you hope that we're going to continue making progress on climate solutions and on engaging folks and working together on those?
Well, thanks for asking that question. And it kind of gets back to what I said earlier. If you're only looking globally, if you're only looking nationally, the picture could appear grim. But when there are things that you can actually do and accomplish, when you're part of the solution, your ability to then extrapolate from that experience to see that if others similarly engage, there can be substantive change made. So the answer to the question is having a feeling of some human agency, that you can get stuff done. And I think I'm encouraged because we're seeing stuff get done. And is it perfect? No. Is it totally revolutionizing the way everyone approaches everything. I think my 18-year-old self would want everything to suddenly change, but this moment of history of being able to achieve substantive change is exciting. It's not perfect, but it's sure better than wringing your hands and bewailing the state of the world. Do something and you'll feel better.
I love that. And it echoes sort of what the ecoAmerica motto is: start with people, stay with people. Absolutely. I think I'm going to add to your resume, he gets stuff done.
That's okay. I like that.
I'm going to put that in your in your bio. So thanks again, Jonathan. It's been great talking to you, and thanks for being part of our Let's Talk Climate series. Thanks to all those who are listening, and this will go on our YouTube channel, and people can you can share with folks, and we just want to keep spreading the good news, and people love looking at best practices in other cities and things that they can do to get stuff done. So
thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to all the ecoAmerica staff. If there are some folks who are watching this who have not gone to the website and looked at the communications tips, you're missing out. There's great information there. So thank you, Jennifer.
So give us that website again.
Your website.
Oh, the ecoAmerica. I thought you were talking Climate Resolve.
No, I'm talking the ecoAmerica website and the communications tips that ecoAmerica has. So.
Oh, that is fabulous. So once again, thanks for joining us. And here is that website for Path to Positive. Subscribe to our newsletter, and you can also subscribe to the Climate Resolve newsletter. Thanks again, and everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thanks, Jonathan.